The Pentagon has invented a new microchip which detects COVID-19 in your body. Should you be concerned? Well, I'm pretty sure Ben Swan is, and he will join us to discuss. The FDA is now recommending pausing the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine after 7 cases of blood clots have recently come to fruition following vaccination, including 1 death. Now, this is being seen as a major blow, as more than 7 million Johnson & Johnson vaccinations have been administered. But why the caution over this now? Well, the Pentagon has developed a chip which can detect the COVID-19 virus in your body once implanted. Could the implant be the next thing the public could be shamed into getting? Well, with all of these details regarding the 2 stories, we bring in investigative journalist Ben Swan. Ben, both of these stories are very alarming to me, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I don't know which one to start with. I'm going to go with the headlines right now that's come out today, talking about the pause of one of the 3 vaccines being offered to the public. So is the FDA being overly cautious, considering, honestly, there's only been 7 cases, and what do we know about those cases?
Yeah, so overly cautious, absolutely not. In fact, the FDA is not being cautious enough. Remember that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, and the Pfizer vaccine have all been issued on an emergency basis, which means the FDA hasn't actually taken a strong look at any of these vaccines. Now, you mentioned there are 7 cases. Some reports are calling them only 6 cases, right, of this, blood clots, essentially, in people who have taken the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. This is very similar, by the way, to the AstraZeneca scandal that's going on in Europe right now, where some European countries have banned the AstraZeneca vaccine because of blood clots there as well. The reason that's significant, Scotty, is because AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson use a very similar process for their vaccines. It's different than the Moderna and the Pfizer. The AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson vaccines are made not identical, but in a very similar way. It's also important to note this for your viewers who are listening, that because of the spike proteins that are used in the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, there are a number of cases for those companies as well when it comes to blood clots and those kinds of conditions. So do you know what the VAERS system is? Perhaps you guys have heard of VAERS. So VAERS is the system by which the public is able to identify problems with vaccines. It's like a self-reporting system. It is, only about 1% of cases, it's estimated, of things happening are actually going into the VAERS system. But if you look at the VAERS system, for instance, I'm looking at numbers from today. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine has actually had 13 cases reported of embolic or thrombotic events dealing with the blood clots, right? Moderna's had 148 cases. Pfizer and BioNTech has had 144 cases, and then unknown manufacturers too. So the idea that the FDA is pushing that says, we got to be careful about this vaccine because there have been 6 cases and yes, 6 million doses out there. Well, actually, there have been 292 cases reported into the VAERS system of people saying that they had some kind, or a family member had some kind of blood clot or issue as a result of taking the vaccine. So the numbers actually seem to be much higher than what the FDA is letting on.
But that's the thing, Ben. When you listen to any commercial, especially at the end of a medicine commercial, we kind of always, I don't want to take it lightly, but you always hear of all the things that could happen if you take this medicine. Blood clots are obviously, they're unfortunately very common when you're taking additional medication because it's changing your body up. That being said, people that are pro-vaccine, that are making sure that, are wanting everybody to get vaccinated, are saying, look, this just shows how careful we are. That with 6 cases, the FDA stepped in. This shows just how safe it is. Do you agree with that? That also confirms that they've got their hand on the pulse of whether these vaccines work or not, if they're willing to shut it down just off of 6 cases.
Yeah, so there's a couple of issues here. Number one is that, listen, as I said, there's very little reporting of how many cases are actually out there. So remember that when someone says, hey, there may have been an issue related to a vaccine, just to be able to get the FDA or the vaccine maker to acknowledge that at all is almost impossible, which indicates that the numbers of what's actually happening are probably much higher than the 6 cases that they'll officially recognize as being connected. That's first. Right. Second of all, keep in mind that when we talk about vaccines in general, that these are very unproven in terms of what other side effects may be there. Listen, people are entitled to go out and get a vaccine if they want to, but the idea that these have been strenuously tested is patently false. They simply haven't been. And now we're beginning to see some of the results of what may come about for some people, especially when it comes to issues like blood clots or even issues with their heart, kidneys, and liver.
And I think that's why people still are very cautious about it, and hopefully people respect each other's decision as they do their research. I want to move on to the microchip, which senses COVID-19 in your body before symptoms and filters the virus from the blood before. It's being developed by the Pentagon. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so all the conspiracy theorists out there, right, who went around saying, hey, they're creating this microchip and it's going to be inserted into your body. It's going to come with the vaccine, and all these folks in the media were like, oh, you people are crazy. There's no microchip. Then the Pentagon comes out and says, hey, actually, we have a microchip. So here's what's fascinating about this, and I actually am releasing a podcast about this today that's pretty lengthy in detail. But what's important is that the government agency, DARPA, right, that does these defense advanced research projects, is the one that actually developed this particular microchip. That they say, oh, it won't track you, and all it's going to do is tell you if you have COVID symptoms. Well, guess what? My body can also tell me if I have COVID symptoms. So why would I need a microchip inserted under my skin in order to tell me whether or not I feel the symptoms of COVID? It's bizarre in that respect, but it's also important to note that DARPA, that same organization, is the same one that was funding gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Virology Lab for the last 10 years, especially since 2014. So the fact that they now want to come out and say, we're going to create a microchip that you can put under your skin, it will tell you whether or not you have COVID. Scotty, do you really trust that that's what this is for? And the fact that this has even been created in the first place, there doesn't seem to be a point to it to tell you that you have COVID.
I think that's what scares me the most about this. Is like you were working on a chip to go into people's skin. By the way, it's coming from the Pentagon. It's not coming from a private medical firm. And I think that's where
right.
my concern really is this one. So here's my question. The look into your future crystal ball, as I've so often asked you, Ben. If this shows to actually be accurate and it can predict it, do you think we could see a push that everybody, just like what we've seen with the mask, the vaccine, a push that you actually have to be microchipped with something from the Pentagon? Could that actually happen in society today?
If you had asked me that question a year ago, I'd say it's nonsense. I'd say today it's very possible. I mean, that's where we're headed with the talk of vaccine passports. And remember that with a microchip, they say, well, it only does this one limited thing right now, but it's a microchip, which means it could be used for many other things, including tracking whether or not you've had your vaccine, or whether or not you're able to travel into other countries because you have the microchip. The application for a microchip is vast once it's already been created. So the idea that it's only there for determining whether or not you have it, I think is untrue. And yes, I think it's very likely there'll be a huge pressure to say the Pentagon is going to start microchipping people, and if you want to travel and you want to be able to go in and out of the country, you have to have this. And anybody who's listening who says, oh, that sounds like a conspiracy, a year ago you would have said it was conspiracy to say that we're going to use the blockchain to create a passport so that you can travel from country to country, and that's happening right now as we speak.
And I have to wonder what's going to happen if private industry gets a hold of this technology as well. Ben, lots of questions that have to be answered by this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Scotty.